It had been raining since morning, the kind of rain that soaks through shoes and leaves the city gray and tired. Inside a small apartment with peeling paint and a flickering bulb, a young mother rocked her baby in her arms, whispering softly for him to fall asleep. She hadn't slept properly in 3 nights. Between work at the cafe, laundry, and looking after her child, rest had become a luxury she could no longer afford. She sat on the edge of the bed, watching the tiny face against her shoulder. The baby's breathing was soft, peaceful. For a moment she forgot about the unpaid rent notice on the table and the sound of dripping water from the ceiling. But when she looked at the calendar, reality came back like a punch. The end of the month was near and she was short on money again. Her phone buzzed. It was her manager from the cafe, asking if she could deliver a late-night coffee order to a corporate building nearby. The regular delivery boy had fallen sick and someone needed to take it. She hesitated, glancing at her sleeping baby. It was already past 9. But then she thought about the milk she needed to buy in the morning and the electricity bill still waiting to be paid. She couldn't afford to say no. She wrapped her baby in a small blanket and put on her old raincoat. The sleeves were a little torn, but it would have to do. She placed the baby in the carrier across her chest and stepped into the rainy night, holding a small paper bag with 2 cups of coffee. The streets were quiet except for the sound of rain hitting puddles. Her shoes were soaked within minutes, but she kept walking, whispering softly to keep her baby calm. When she finally reached the tall glass building, she felt small standing in front of it. The lights from the upper floors glowed against the wet streets. She entered the lobby quietly, trying not to draw attention. The security guard at the front desk gave her a quick look, then nodded when she showed the cafe's name and order slip. He directed her to the elevator, saying the delivery was for the top floor, the executive suite. She pressed the button and stepped in, still catching her breath. The elevator doors closed slowly, sealing her inside. The soft hum of machinery was the only sound for a few seconds. Then the lift started moving upward. She leaned against the wall, clutching the coffee bag in one hand while supporting her baby with the other. She counted the floors on the small digital screen. 4, 5, 6, 7. Everything seemed fine. Then suddenly the light flickered once, twice, and went out completely. Her heart jumped. The elevator came to a stop with a small jolt. For a second there was only silence. Then a low alarm beeped faintly in the background. Her mind froze. She pressed the emergency button, but nothing happened. The air felt heavier now, and the faint hum of electricity was gone. Panic started crawling into her chest. She tried again, pressing all the buttons, but the panel stayed dark. The baby stirred in her arms and let out a small cry. She held him close, trying to stay calm. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. It's just a small stop. We'll be out soon." Then she heard movement in the corner. A deep, steady voice spoke through the darkness. "Are you all right?" She startled slightly, realizing she wasn't alone. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light of the emergency bulb, she saw a tall man standing near the back wall. He was dressed in a formal suit, his expression calm but alert. She hadn't noticed him when she first entered. Maybe he'd been on a call or standing quietly. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, embarrassed. "I didn't know someone else was here." "It's all right," he said softly. "Looks like we're both stuck." He stepped forward, keeping a polite distance, and took out his phone. He tried to call someone, but there was no signal. He sighed quietly, then looked at her again. "Do you have your phone?" She shook her head. "It's old. No network most of the time." The baby whimpered again, sensing the tension. She gently rocked him, her voice low. The man watched quietly for a moment before speaking again. "How old is your son?" 7 months, she replied, her tone shy but warm. "He gets scared easily when it's dark." The man nodded and took off his jacket, folding it neatly before offering it to her. "It's cold in here. Maybe cover him with this." Her first instinct was to refuse. People didn't usually offer her things. But when she saw the baby shivering slightly, she accepted it. "Thank you," she murmured. He smiled faintly. "No problem. They'll probably get us out soon." Minutes passed. The air felt heavier. The faint sound of rain outside the building mixed with the hum of the elevator's emergency system. She sat down carefully on the floor, leaning against the wall while holding her baby close. The man sat a short distance away, resting his elbows on his knees. To pass time, he asked, "You work for the cafe on the corner?" She nodded. Yes, it's a small job, but it helps. I take shifts whenever they need me. He studied her face quietly, noticing how tired she looked, how her eyes carried both exhaustion and strength. And you came out in this weather? With your baby? She gave a small, tired laugh. I didn't have anyone to leave him with. It's just the two of us, and I really needed the extra money. The man didn't reply immediately. He just nodded as if understanding more than he said. There was something gentle in his silence, not pity, just quiet respect. How about you? She asked softly, trying to keep her voice calm. You work here? He hesitated for a moment, then smiled faintly. Yes, something like that. She didn't press further. She assumed he was some late-night employee, maybe an executive working overtime. She couldn't imagine he was the head of the entire company. The baby began to fuss again. She took out a small bottle of milk from her bag, but it had gone cold. She sighed, realizing she didn't have warm water to heat it. Seeing this, the man stood up and pressed the intercom button again. Hello, anyone there? His voice was calm but firm. No response came. He turned back to her. Still nothing. They'll fix it soon. He sat back down, glancing at the small baby bottle in her hand. Does he have a name? She smiled faintly and whispered it. A simple, sweet name that carried the warmth of her late husband's memory. The man repeated it softly, smiling. That's a good name, Strong. She looked at him curiously. There was something unusual about him, his tone, his manners, the way he spoke. He didn't seem like someone ordinary. His watch alone looked more expensive than her month's salary. But there was kindness in the way he talked, and that made her feel safe. Time passed slowly. The baby finally fell asleep again, and the elevator remained still. The man offered her a bottle of water from his briefcase. Here, you should drink something, he said. She accepted it gratefully. They talked quietly for a while. She told him how she'd lost her husband in an accident, how life had become a constant race against time, and how she tried every day to stay strong for her son. She didn't know why she was telling him all this. Maybe because of the silence, or maybe because it had been so long since someone had really listened. He listened without interrupting. His expression softened as she spoke. Something about her words reminded him of his own mother, who had once struggled just the same way when his father left them. He had built everything from nothing, the company, the success, but somewhere along the way he had forgotten what real strength looked like. After a while, the baby stirred again, making a small sound. She began to hum a soft lullaby. Her voice filled the small space, gentle, warm, and real. The man looked away, his throat tightening slightly. It wasn't just a song, it was the sound of love surviving through pain. The moment felt still, almost sacred. Two strangers, one rich and one poor, sitting in a dark elevator. Yet somehow they understood each other better than anyone else could. After almost an hour, the emergency lights flickered. The man stood and pressed the button again. This time a crackling voice came through, announcing that help was on the way. She exhaled, relieved. He smiled, reassuring her. See, I told you. Just a little more patience. The baby shifted and opened his eyes, looking up curiously at the tall man standing nearby. For the first time, a small giggle escaped the baby's lips. The man chuckled quietly. He's got a brave little heart, he said softly. She smiled back. He has to. The world's not easy. The elevator trembled slightly, then began to move again. The lights turned back on, bright and clear. Relief washed over her face. She stood up carefully, holding her baby, while the man straightened his jacket and adjusted his tie. When the doors finally opened, she blinked against the sudden brightness of the hallway. People were waiting outside. Technicians, security guards, and office staff. She quickly apologized for the trouble, embarrassed and flustered. The man stepped out behind her, calm and composed. The staff rushed to him immediately, addressing him as Sir, but she didn't hear clearly. She was too focused on calming her baby. She turned to thank him for his kindness, but he was already surrounded by people asking questions. She thought he must be someone important. She smiled faintly, whispered a quiet thank you under her breath, and began walking toward the exit. She didn't know yet that the man she'd been trapped with was the CEO of the entire building, and that this unexpected night would soon change everything in her life, forever. The night after the elevator incident, she couldn't stop thinking about the man. His calm voice, the way he had treated her and her baby, the quiet strength in his eyes. It all stayed in her mind as she tucked her son into bed. She didn't even know his name. Amon, all she knew was that he had made her feel safe when she had thought the world was closing in around her. The next morning, she returned to her small cafe, still tired but carrying a strange sense of hope. She kept glancing at the phone in her bag, almost expecting a message, a call, anything from the man from the elevator. But there was nothing. She shook her head. She shouldn't expect anything. He had been a stranger, and she was just a single mother trying to make ends meet. Yet life had a way of surprising her. Around midday, her phone rang. She glanced at it, confused to see an unknown number. Hesitating for a moment, she answered. "Hello," she said, her voice careful. "Hello, this is the office of the building you visited last night. We need to speak with you. Could you come to the building today?" Her heart skipped a beat. Yes, I can come," she said quickly, a mix of excitement and nervousness filling her. When she arrived at the building later that afternoon, her palms were sweaty. She entered the same lobby, the same marble floor shining under the bright lights. The receptionist smiled politely and led her to a glass-walled office on the top floor. She couldn't help but feel out of place. Her worn shoes, her faded coat, her tired eyes. She imagined everyone here looked more polished, more refined. The door opened, and there he was. The man from the elevator, sitting behind a large mahogany desk. He looked the same, calm, poised, his eyes carrying the same warmth she remembered. "Please have a seat," he said. His voice was steady, inviting. She sat down, careful not to spill her bag or disturb her baby, who was sleeping quietly in the stroller she had brought. I wasn't expecting this," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "Neither was I, honestly. But I remembered our conversation last night. I want to offer you something," she blinked. "Me? What could you possibly offer me?" He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Not everyone gets a second chance in life, but sometimes opportunity comes unexpectedly. I know your situation. I know how hard it is to be a single mother, struggling to survive day by day. I also saw something else in you: strength, courage, patience, and love. I'd like to offer you a full-time position here in the company cafeteria. It comes with better pay, healthcare support, and childcare assistance." Her mouth went dry. She stared at him, unsure she had heard correctly. I don't understand. Why would you help me like this?" He smiled softly. "Because you reminded me what real determination looks like. You didn't ask for help, you just kept going. That's rare. And the way you cared for your baby last night. It showed me that people can be both strong and gentle. That's the kind of spirit I want in my company, not just in the cafeteria, but in life." Tears welled in her eyes. She looked down at her baby, who stirred slightly in the stroller. She whispered to him, "Mommy, can you believe it?" The man noticed and chuckled quietly. "Believe it. You've earned it. Not because of who I am, but because of who you are." She sat back, letting the words sink in. For the first time in years, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She remembered the nights she cried quietly in the dark, worrying about rent, food, and bills. She remembered the shame of feeling like she wasn't enough. And now someone saw her, really saw her. The interview was simple. He asked her about her experience at the cafe, her work habits, and how she managed stressful situations. She answered honestly, her words flowing naturally. He listened, occasionally nodding or offering gentle encouragement. He didn't look down on her. He didn't treat her like she was a charity case. He treated her like she belonged. By the end of the meeting, he shook her hand firmly. "Welcome aboard," he said. "Start tomorrow. We'll help with everything you need to settle in. Don't worry about anything else." She could barely speak. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know what to say. Just be yourself," he said, smiling. "That's all I ask." That night, she returned home, clutching her baby tightly, feeling as if the world had shifted beneath her feet. She told him the story as she tucked him into bed, her voice shaking with emotion. He cooed and reached out to touch her face, and she laughed softly. For the first time in months, she felt truly safe. The following days were a whirlwind. She moved into a small, neat apartment close to the cafe. The company provided childcare support for her baby, and she could finally work without the constant fear of leaving him alone. She bought warm clothes, fresh groceries, and even a small toy for her son. Simple things she hadn't been able to afford before. At the company, people were polite and welcoming. She noticed that the staff spoke about the CEO with respect, but she could see the warmth in his actions when he passed by. Sometimes he would stop by the cafeteria and ask her how she was doing. Not as a boss checking in, but as someone genuinely caring. Over time, she began to regain her confidence. She found herself smiling more, laughing with other mothers who worked in the building and even making small plans for the future. She thought about going back to school, maybe learning something new to improve her life even more. She felt a spark inside her that she hadn't felt in a long time. One afternoon, she found herself alone in the cafeteria, wiping down tables. The CEO walked in quietly, carrying a stack of files. He paused and watched her for a moment, then smiled. "You've done well here," he said softly. "I wanted to tell you that. Not just for work, but for handling everything in your life with such grace. It's inspiring." She looked up, surprised. I'm just trying my best." "And that's exactly why it matters," he said. "It's easy to give up when life gets hard. But you keep going. You remind me why I work so hard myself. People like you deserve every chance, every opportunity." For the first time, she realized something important. Her life wasn't just about surviving anymore. She could dream. She could hope. She could imagine a future where she and her son were safe, happy, and thriving. And someone who had achieved everything she ever thought she could never have had seen her, really seen her and believed in her. Days turned into weeks. She settled into a routine. The baby was happier, more comfortable, and always surrounded by warmth. She managed her work smoothly, gaining respect from the staff and even forming friendships with people she had never thought she could trust. One evening, after her shift, the CEO called her into his office. She walked in cautiously, unsure what it could be about. "Have a seat," he said warmly. "I wanted to share something with you. Last night I attended a meeting with some other business leaders and I realized I don't just want to help you. I want to help others like you." She looked at him, puzzled. "I want to start a program here at the company," he explained. "A program to support single parents, struggling mothers and fathers, people trying to make a better life for their children. You've shown me how much difference one small act of kindness can make, and I want to pay it forward." She felt her throat tighten. I don't know what to say." "That's incredible." "Say nothing," he said gently. "Just keep being the person you are. That's enough." Walking home that night, she felt the rain in a completely different way than before. It was no longer cold or frightening. The sound was comforting, like it was washing away the fear and hardship she had carried for so long. She held her baby close and whispered softly, "We're going to be okay, little one. We're really going to be okay now." For the first time, she believed it. Life was still challenging and there were still obstacles, but for the first time in years, she felt seen, valued, and strong. She had survived the elevator, survived life's struggles, and now finally, the doors had opened in ways she never could have imagined. The small spark of hope from that night had grown into a flame, lighting the path to a new beginning. And she knew deep in her heart that nothing could take it away. The air inside the elevator had grown warm and heavy. It felt like time had stopped. The woman sat on the floor, her baby sleeping in her arms again, his tiny fingers clutching her shirt as if afraid to let go. The man sat across from her, his back resting against the metal wall. The dim emergency light above flickered softly, casting long shadows across their faces. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, just deep, like both were lost in their own thoughts. The baby's gentle breathing filled the space, reminding them that even in a moment like this, life went on. Finally, the man broke the silence. His voice was calm, thoughtful. "You're very brave," he said quietly. The woman looked up, surprised. "Brave?" she repeated with a small laugh. "I don't think so. I'm just trying to survive." He nodded slowly. "That's what makes you brave." She didn't know how to answer that, so she looked away, her eyes fixed on the baby's face. "I guess when you have someone depending on you, you don't have a choice," she said softly. "You just keep going, no matter how tired you are." The man studied her for a moment. She was young, maybe in her late 20s, but her eyes carried a quiet sadness that only life's struggles could bring. "You work at the cafe downstairs, right?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "I usually do double shifts. It's hard, but it helps pay the rent." She paused for a moment, her voice lowering. "Sometimes when I can't find someone to watch him, I bring my baby with me. My boss doesn't like it, but I don't have anyone else." The man's expression softened. You're doing a lot on your own, she smiled faintly. I've been doing it since he was born. His father left when I was pregnant. He said he wasn't ready for this kind of life. Her voice cracked slightly, but she quickly took a breath and continued. At first I thought I couldn't do it. I cried every night. But then, when I saw my son for the first time, I promised him that I'd never give up. Even if the world gave up on me. The man didn't interrupt. He just listened, really listened. His eyes showed respect, not pity. That made her feel safe to keep talking. She went on. There are days when I can't even afford proper food for both of us. I eat less so he can have enough milk. Sometimes when I walk past those fancy restaurants or see people dressed nicely, I wonder what it feels like to live without worrying every single minute. Her words hung in the air. The man leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. You know, he said quietly, I grew up poor too. She looked at him almost in disbelief. You did? He nodded. My mother raised me alone. My father left when I was 10. We didn't have much. Some nights we had nothing to eat at all. But she worked hard just like you. She cleaned offices and served coffee, the same way you do now. For a moment his gaze drifted to the flickering light above. I remember one night the electricity in our home went out. She sat beside me in the dark, holding my hand. She said, one day you'll have the power to change someone's life. When that day comes, don't forget where you came from. The woman listened silently, her heart tightening at his words. There was a softness in his tone that felt real. Not something said out of sympathy, but something lived through. She sounds like a strong woman, the young mother said quietly. She was, he replied. She passed away a few years ago, but every day I still hear her voice in my head. I think she'd be proud if she could see me now. The baby stirred a little, letting out a small cry. The woman gently rocked him, whispering softly until he calmed down again. The man watched with quiet admiration. There was something beautiful about the way she cared for her child. Tired but patient, struggling but full of love. As minutes turned into an hour, the two of them continued to talk. They shared small details, favorite foods, small memories, dreams they once had but could never chase. It felt strange opening up to a stranger, but somehow it felt natural. The elevator had turned into a small world of its own, a place where titles and wealth didn't matter. At one point, the woman took out a small piece of bread from her bag. It was slightly crushed, but she broke it in half and offered it to him. You must be hungry too, she said shyly. He smiled. Thank you, they ate quietly. The taste didn't matter. It was the warmth of sharing that filled the silence. After a while, he looked at the baby and asked, What's his name? She told him, and he smiled at the sound. He's lucky, he said softly. He has a mother who's stronger than most people I've met. She blushed slightly, shaking her head. I don't know about that. I do, he replied. Strength isn't about power or money. It's about love, and the will to keep going when everything feels impossible. His words touched her deeply. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen. Not as a poor woman, not as a struggling mother, but as a person. Time passed slowly. The baby woke up again, and she tried to distract him by humming a soft tune. Her voice was gentle, filled with emotion. It wasn't a song from the radio or something she learned. It was an old lullaby her mother used to sing. The melody floated through the quiet elevator, almost like magic. The man leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over him. It reminded him of his childhood, the same kind of warmth and sadness mixed together. When the song ended, there was silence again. But this time it felt peaceful. He opened his eyes and said softly, You have a beautiful voice. She smiled faintly. It's the only thing that calms him down. I used to sing to him even when I was scared or hungry. Somehow it made me feel stronger. The man nodded. Music does that. It reminds us that we're still human, even when life feels too heavy. She looked at him then, really looked. His expensive watch, his polished shoes, the kind of confidence that only people in power carry. And yet in this moment he didn't seem like one of those rich men she saw passing by every day. He seemed kind, human. She hesitated before asking, What do you do for a living? He smiled slightly. I run the company in this building. Her eyes widened. You're the boss? He nodded. Something like that. She looked down quickly, embarrassed. I'm sorry for talking so much. I didn't mean to waste your time, he shook his head. You didn't waste anything. I think this is the most meaningful conversation I've had in a long time. Her eyes softened, unsure how to respond. I didn't expect someone like you to listen to someone like me. He sighed, his voice turning thoughtful. People forget that no matter how much money or success you have, we all start somewhere. Some of us just get lucky, but that doesn't make anyone better than the other. Those words stayed with her. She couldn't explain why, but they filled her with a quiet sense of hope, something she hadn't felt in a long while. The hours continued to pass. Occasionally they could hear faint noises outside the elevator, people talking, tools clanking, signs that help was coming. Still, inside they had already found something rare, understanding. The man checked his watch. It's been over 2 hours, he murmured. Feels like longer, she replied with a tired smile. He smiled back. Maybe because we've both had a long day. She nodded. Yes, but this feels different. Strange but not bad, he agreed. Sometimes life traps us in unexpected places just to make us slow down and really see each other. She looked down at her baby, brushing a hand over his tiny cheek. Maybe this happened for a reason. He met her eyes. Maybe it did. The sound of metal creaking echoed above them. The rescue team was finally making progress. The woman felt her chest tighten with relief, but also a strange sadness. Somehow she didn't want this strange, honest connection to end so quickly. The man stood up and offered his hand to help her rise. She took it, her fingers trembling slightly. Thank you, she whispered. For what? He asked. For listening, she said. And for reminding me that not all people look down on others. He smiled gently. And thank you for reminding me what real strength looks like. The elevator shook slightly and a loud clang echoed as the rescuers started opening the doors. The woman held her baby tighter, ready to step out, not knowing that when those doors opened, her life was about to change forever. Weeks turned into months, and her life began to settle into a quiet rhythm she had never known before. Every morning she woke up early, fed her baby, and got ready for work. There was still a sense of struggle, bills to pay, endless chores, and nights when the baby wouldn't sleep. But things felt different now. For the first time, she wasn't scared of tomorrow. Her job at the company cafeteria had become more than just work. She had started to enjoy it. She loved the smell of freshly brewed coffee in the morning, the friendly faces of the staff, and the laughter that sometimes filled the small break area. People respected her there. They trusted her. They came to her for small things, a cup of tea, a kind word, or advice when life got heavy. She had become a quiet part of their day, someone who brought warmth to even the busiest mornings. Sometimes she still saw the CEO. Not often, but enough to notice how different he was from what she had imagined powerful people to be. He never acted proud or distant. When he passed through the cafeteria, he greeted everyone with a nod or a smile. Whenever their eyes met, he would give a small, knowing look, not one of superiority, but recognition, like they shared a quiet secret about that night in the elevator. One afternoon, she was cleaning up after lunch when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw him standing there holding a cup of coffee. You make it better than anyone else, he said with a small smile. She laughed softly. It's just coffee. Maybe, he said, but sometimes it's the small things that make the biggest difference. He stayed for a few minutes, talking about his day, the new projects, and even a little about his past. She listened quietly, not sure why he shared such personal thoughts with her, but it felt natural. He told her how before he had everything, he too had faced days when he couldn't even afford bus fare. His voice carried a strange mix of strength and sadness, like someone who had learned the price of success. You know, he said at one point, looking out the cafeteria window, I built this company because I wanted control over my life. But sometimes when I see people like you, people who carry real courage, I realize control doesn't mean much. Heart does. She didn't quite know what to say. She just smiled faintly and said, maybe we all just keep trying no matter what. He nodded. Yes, and that's what makes you strong. Over the next few weeks, their short conversations became something of a routine. Sometimes he would stop by early in the morning for coffee before his meetings. Other times he would visit in the evening when most employees had gone home, just to ask how she and her baby were doing. It was never more than a few minutes, but those moments became something she looked forward to quietly. She had never had someone really listen before. Most people saw her as just another struggling woman trying to make ends meet. But he didn't. He noticed the details, when she looked tired, when her smile was forced, when she was genuinely happy. Still, she kept reminding herself who he was. The CEO, the man whose name was on every floor of that building, and who she was, a worker, a mother just trying to survive. She never let herself imagine anything beyond the friendship they shared. It was enough that he cared. One rainy evening, the lights flickered again inside the cafeteria, just like that night months ago. She laughed softly to herself, remembering how scared she had been back then. The memory felt distant now, like a story that had happened to someone else. The baby was at daycare and she was finishing her shift, humming quietly to pass the time. The CEO entered, soaked from the rain but smiling. "I think the city is trying to repeat history," he said. She laughed. At least the elevator's working this time. He placed his umbrella by the door and sat down at one of the small tables. "You know, I was just thinking today, sometimes we need to get stuck somewhere to find the right direction." She poured him a fresh cup of coffee. "Maybe being stuck isn't always bad," she said gently. He nodded, watching the rain fall outside. Exactly. The moment felt peaceful. The sound of rain, the warmth of the room, the smell of coffee. It all felt strangely comforting. They talked about simple things, the baby's first words, the company's new community program, and even childhood memories. The conversation was light, yet every word carried meaning. After a while, he stood up. "I should go. Early meeting tomorrow." He paused at the door, looking back at her. "Thank you for reminding me what matters," she smiled. "You don't have to thank me. You've done more for me than you know." He shook his head. "No. You helped me too." Then he left, disappearing into the rain, leaving her standing there, heart full of emotions she couldn't name. The next few days, she noticed something different around the office. There were posters announcing a new company initiative, a support program for single parents. The CEO had created it himself. It offered flexible hours, daycare assistance, and even educational scholarships for workers who wanted to study again. When she read the details, tears filled her eyes. She knew exactly where the idea had come from. That afternoon, during a staff meeting, the CEO addressed everyone. He spoke about the importance of giving people chances, of remembering that behind every worker there was a story. Sometimes, he said, the greatest strength comes from the quietest people, the ones who wake up every day and keep going, no matter how heavy life feels. The room was silent. Everyone listened. She stood in the back holding a tray, her heart beating fast. She knew those words were meant for her, not directly but deeply. After the meeting, as everyone left, he walked past her and gave a small nod. Nothing more, but that was enough. Her life continued to bloom in small, beautiful ways. Her baby started walking, taking tiny steps around the daycare, laughing loudly whenever she picked him up after work. She began saving money, planning for the future, maybe to finish her education or open a small bakery one day. The people in the company began to know her story. Not because she told it, but because the CEO did. Always with respect, always as an example of hope. "This woman," he had once said during an internal meeting, "reminded me that success isn't about money or titles. It's about kindness, patience, and faith." Those words spread quietly across the building. People began to treat her differently, not out of pity but admiration. She became a quiet inspiration for others who were struggling. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, she stood by the large glass window near the cafeteria and looked out at the city. It shimmered in orange light. She thought about everything that had happened since that night, how one moment in a broken elevator had turned into a doorway to a new life. She heard a voice behind her. "You're still here?" She turned and saw him again, smiling gently. "Just finishing up," she said. He walked over, standing beside her. For a moment, they both looked out at the same view. The city below, the sky above, and the faint hum of life in between. "It's strange," he said quietly. "So many people live in the same city, crossing paths every day, never knowing that one small moment could change everything." She nodded. "I think life brings the right people together at the right time." He looked at her, then at the small charm hanging from her baby's blanket resting on a nearby chair. "You've done well. I hope you know that," she smiled softly. "I'm just grateful. Sometimes I still can't believe how things turned out." He chuckled lightly. Neither can I. They stood there in silence for a while, just watching the sky darken. It wasn't about wealth or power or charity anymore. It was about two people who had shared a strange, unforgettable night that changed both of their lives in quiet, lasting ways. Before leaving, he said something that stayed with her forever. You know, the elevator stopped that night, but maybe that was the moment everything really started moving. For both of us. She didn't reply. She just smiled, holding that thought close to her heart. Later that night, as she walked home carrying her sleeping baby, she looked up at the tall building one last time. The lights from the top floor glowed faintly in the distance. She whispered softly, "Thank you," though no one could hear because she knew some doors didn't just open. They changed everything. The next morning, she woke up early, long before the sun had risen. Her small apartment was quiet except for the soft breathing of her baby, who was still asleep beside her. The events from the night before felt like a strange dream. The elevator, the long hours trapped inside, and the kind man who had sat across from her, listening to her story with genuine care. She shook her head slightly as if trying to clear the memories. It had felt too personal, too real for someone of his status to care. Maybe he was just being kind, she thought. People like him didn't usually remember people like her. She smiled sadly and got out of bed, ready to start another long day. Her body ached from exhaustion, but she had to go on. She got dressed quietly, warmed a small bottle of milk, and held her baby close, whispering, "We'll be fine. One day things will get better." Later that morning, she went to the cafe where she worked. The moment she entered, her coworker handed her a note. "Someone from the building upstairs called," her coworker said. "They want you to come in today. Something about a meeting." The young woman froze. "A meeting? With who?" Her coworker shrugged. "Didn't say, but it sounded serious." Her heart began to beat faster. Could it be about last night? Had she done something wrong? Maybe she had caused trouble in the building when the elevator broke. Panic washed over her, but she took a deep breath. "All right," she said softly. "I'll go after my shift." But by noon, she couldn't stop thinking about it. So during her short break, she wrapped her baby carefully, left him with a trusted neighbor for a few hours, and made her way to the tall glass building once again. The security guard recognized her and smiled politely. "You're expected," he said, pointing her toward the top floor. Her hands trembled as she stepped into the elevator, the same one where everything had happened. This time the lights were bright, and the soft hum of the machine filled the silence. Still, every second felt heavy with memories. When the doors opened, she stepped into a quiet hallway lined with polished marble floors and large paintings. A receptionist greeted her kindly and asked her to wait for a moment. Then, after a few minutes, she was led into a spacious office with wide windows overlooking the city. Sitting behind a sleek wooden desk was the same man from the elevator. He looked up and smiled warmly. "I was hoping you'd come." She stood frozen for a moment, unsure what to say. I wasn't sure if you'd even remember me," she admitted. He laughed softly. "It's hard to forget someone who shared a sandwich with you in a dark elevator." His tone was light, but his eyes carried real kindness. He gestured for her to sit. She hesitated, then took the seat across from him. "I wanted to thank you," he said sincerely. "That night you reminded me of something I had almost forgotten, what true strength looks like. You showed me that courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's just a mother trying to keep her child safe." She looked down, embarrassed but touched. "I didn't do anything special," she murmured. "You did more than you realize," he replied. "And I'd like to help if you'll let me." Her eyes widened slightly. "Help?" "Yes, I've spoken to my team. There's a position open in our company cafeteria. It's a full-time job with a steady income, health benefits, and childcare assistance. It's yours if you want it." For a moment, she couldn't find her voice. Her hands gripped the edge of her chair. "Are you serious?" she whispered. "Completely," he said. "You've worked hard for years just to survive. You deserve stability and a chance to build a life, not just get through each day." Tears welled in her eyes, and she quickly wiped them away. "I don't know how to thank you." He shook his head gently. "You don't need to. Just promise me one thing. Never stop believing that you deserve better. People like you inspire others to be better too." She couldn't hold back her tears anymore. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Not just for the job, but for seeing me." He smiled kindly. It's easy to see someone when you actually look. That day marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life. Within a few weeks, she started her job in the company cafeteria. The work was honest and steady, and for the first time in years, she didn't have to worry about skipping meals or missing rent. She could afford small things now: warm clothes for her baby, a few toys, even fresh flowers someday. Means to brighten her home. She worked hard, always arriving early, always smiling. People in the building began to recognize her, not as the poor woman from before, but as someone dependable, kind, and always ready to help others. The CEO often passed by the cafeteria and would stop to talk for a few minutes. Their conversations were short but meaningful, about life, about how she was adjusting, and sometimes about her baby, who everyone in the office adored. Months passed. Her confidence began to grow. She enrolled in evening classes to learn new skills, and the company even supported her efforts. Slowly, she started to believe in herself again. One day, she received a note from the CEO's assistant asking her to attend a company event. She almost said no, thinking she wouldn't fit in with the others. But something inside her told her to go. That evening, she put on a simple but elegant dress, one of the first nice things she had bought for herself in years, and arrived at the event nervously. The hall was filled with people in suits, laughter, and music. She stood quietly in the corner until the CEO spotted her and waved her over. He was standing on stage preparing to give a speech. When she approached, he smiled and said, "Please stay." The room grew quiet as he began to speak. "Tonight," he said, "I want to share a story, not about business or success, but about strength." He looked toward her. "A few months ago, I got stuck in an elevator. It was an inconvenient situation, but it became one of the most meaningful nights of my life. I met a woman who reminded me what true courage looks like. She was tired, struggling, yet she smiled and cared for her child as if nothing could break her. That night, I realized something. Success means nothing if we forget the value of humanity." The crowd listened silently. Some looked toward the young woman who stood quietly, eyes shining with emotion. He continued, "Because of her, we started a new program at our company, one that helps single parents find stable jobs and build better futures for their families." Her strength inspired all of this. Applause filled the room. The woman's heart pounded in her chest as everyone turned to look at her. She didn't know what to do, so she simply smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. After the event, many people came up to her, some to thank her, others to share their own struggles. For the first time, she realized that her story, once filled with pain, had become a light for others. That night, when she returned home, her baby was asleep, his small hand resting against her pillow. She sat beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "We did it," she whispered. "We're going to be okay." Outside, the city lights shimmered through her window. She thought of that night in the elevator, how scared she had been, how trapped she had felt, and how it had turned into the moment that changed everything. The elevator doors had opened not just to a hallway, but to a new beginning. From that day forward, she carried herself differently. She smiled more. She believed more. And every morning before leaving for work, she whispered the same words to her baby. "Whatever happens, never give up. Life always finds a way to open the right doors."